Amine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachadine. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatadine. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. During this visit, the theme is discussing the lives and the contributions and the personalities of the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. Familiar a little bit? Yes, a little bit. Okay, good. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had many, many, many wonderful associates. And outstanding amongst those many, many, many associates were the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. And so far we've already discussed two of them, Rupa and Sanatan Goswami. In the list at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, just at the end of the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, there's a list of our disciplic succession, going back to Lord Brahma, the original preceptor of our Sampradaya, Brahma Sampradaya. And when it comes to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the next in line following Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are Rupa and Sanatan. And contemporary, but a little bit younger than them, was Raghunatha Dasa Goswami. And you see the dates of when he lived. The painting is depicting Raghunatha Das by the side of Jagannath Puri Temple. He was, although he was from one of the wealthiest families in India at the time, there's some number of what was their income, and it's a big number, like many millions of dollars per year, several millions of dollars a year of income. And he was the only son or the heir of all that wealth and landholders and so forth. But from childhood, he had no inclination to worldly attractions. When he came to join Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we'll hear the story, he went through a series of decreasing. You'll hear some more as we go along. But the painting is, he ended up taking the rice that was distributed at the food stalls, the prasadam stalls, but it spoiled, and they took the spoiled rice and threw it over for the cows to eat. It's still there by the side of the temple. You could see the water running down the side of the temple wall. And he took that rice, washed it with water so the rotten part would be gone, and the uncooked inner part was all that was left. And that was his food. Even the rice that even the cows wouldn't eat. Pretty intense, huh? So that's Raghunatha Dasa Goswami, or a feature of his life. That's the painting that's commonly used to indicate Raghunatha Dasa Goswami. And he lived for 92 years. He remained with his family at home for 31 years. He was with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri for 16 years. And then he went to Vrindavan, mainly residing at Radhakund for 45 years. So he lived a long life. And we'll hear something about his wonderful life. As we know, as Lord Chaitanya himself is Krishna in the role of a devotee of Krishna, and Lord Nityananda is Balaram, in the mood of a devotee of Lord Chaitanya, as Balaram was a servant of Krishna. So also each and every one of the members of Lord Chaitanya's associates have their spiritual counterpart in Krishna Lila. And these are the names found in Gauragunadesh Dipika, Rasa Manjari, sometimes identified as Rati Manjari, and Bhanumati, all associates of Srimati Radharani, or in other words, his rasa was that of a in conjugal relation with Krishna in his spiritual identity. He's best remembered for his renunciation. Chaitanya Charitamrita says, Raghunatha Dasa Goswami was totally uninterested in material enjoyment, even from his childhood. That was mentioned. He's our acharya, or the teacher, about the ultimate goal of life, that the Vedas are identified as having three parts, the whole of the Vedas, that which describes the relationship of everything with the source of emanation, sambandha, relationship. When one acts in that relationship, that's abhideya, and prayojan is what happens when you act in that relationship, or the ultimate goal. So he's the acharya for teaching us how one lives one's life in such a way that one achieves the goal of life. What does it look like? Just to give some idea of his spiritual strength, there's a nice description one time. Rupa Goswami had given him a copy of this Lalita Madhava to read. And Lalita Madhava describes, from the very beginning, it describes the mood of separation that the gopis felt when Krishna left Vrindavan to go to Mathura. And from reading Lalita Madhava, Raghunatha Dasa's life withered because he was moved like one of the gopi assistants of Radharani. And so the associates of Raghunath let Rupa Goswami know what had happened after he gave him the Lalita Madhava to read. So Rupa Goswami wrote another book. The other book was Dana Keli Chintamani. Dana Keli Chintamani is a book that's describing the tax pastime where Krishna and Radha would have funny exchanges together. So Rupa Goswami wrote that one. It's much smaller, and said, here, you read this one instead. I want to do some changes on this Lalita Madhava, so give me the book back. And he became happy again, instead of, emaciated due to the transcendental feelings of the gopis' separation from Krishna. In fact, he even wrote his own version of such a book, tax pastime book. Yeah. Here's a picture of a pot of sweet rice. And he had a certain mood when he was, he was known for his intense renunciation in all respects, including eating. It is said that he would eat every other day a leaf cup of buttermilk every other day. So much to everyone's surprise, he was at some point in time experiencing stomach problems, So they had a doctor come and check him to see what was wrong. And the doctor said he's eaten too much sweet rice. And everyone said that's ridiculous because he doesn't. He only eats every other day a little leaf cup of buttermilk. So they brought in two other doctors, and the doctors confirmed the same thing. And Raghunath Das understood what had happened. What had happened was he was deeply absorbed in a meditation upon a pastime of Radha and Krishna, where they were offering sweet rice to Krishna, and Krishna tasted it and liked it so much, he wanted all the gopis to take some too, and they gave some to Rati Manjari, who was Raghunath Das in his spiritual form, and they were all in a happy way eating too much sweet rice. And so his physical body became ill as if he had eaten sweet rice. You got it? He was acting on the physical plane, but his consciousness was on the spiritual plane. It's something like, if you have a dream, and supposing in the dream it's something that's very scary, and you wake up and you're perspiring, and maybe you scream or something. It's just in the mind, but the body becomes affected. And from it wasn't just his material mind, but his spiritual consciousness was always with Radha and Krishna. And that naturally had its impact on his physical body. There's another pastime to indicate his intensity of absorption in the love of Radha and her gopi friends. This is a photograph of a place on the west side of Govardhan Hill. The area is called Sakhi Stali. Sakhi Stali is the area where Chandravali and her gopis resided. And Raghunath Das was living at Radhakund, and he was offered some buttermilk from some specially large leaves that were brought from Sakhi Stali. He didn't know that till he asked, but this is what a leaf cup looks like. And so as he was drinking the sweet rice, or the buttermilk, he asked, "Where'd you get these big leaves?" And the devotee, his name was Haridas. Haridas said to Raghunath, "I got from the pulasa leaves in the trees by Sakhi Stali," and immediately Raghunath Das threw it away, unfinished. He just tossed it away. Don't ever go there again. Don't even go there. Meaning, his mood was so deeply absorbed in the mood of Radha and her gopi friends that were competitors with Chandravali and her gopi friends that he threw away the little buttermilk and instructed his assistant, don't go there. It's his transcendental mood. It's said in Chaitanya Charitamrita, just a couple other points, his regulative principles were exactly like lines in stone. As you saw, he lived for a very old age, 92. And as he was getting older and older and older, he still maintained his standards. There are several places that describe when he was very old, he would do circumambulation around Radhakund and around Govardhan, and he would pay obeisances before the deities. But when he got so old, he couldn't get back up again. And people would see him just prostrated in front of the deities, and they understood what was going on, so they helped him get up and said, probably not a good idea for you to pay obeisances. And he said, yes, I think you're right. But then they come back the next day and he was doing, because he was just very fixed in his regulations. not as a regulative bhakta, but because he was on the spontaneous platform. Yet, even within the spontaneous platform, he was so fixed in his regulation. Here's something that Prabhupada said about Raghunatha Dasa Goswami. You see, this is pilgrims doing their dandavats parikram around Radhakund. They take a rock and place the rock up by their head, and then stand and place their feet where the rock is, and then extend their body again, and this way go around Govardhan Hill or go around Radhakund, etc. So this is Prabhupada speaking in Bombay. Raghunatha Dasa Goswami showed how to live in Radhakund. He was circumambulating Radhakund, falling down, making a mark. That is Radhakund Vasi. Not only counted holy names, but offering obeisances so many 100 times. So much vairagya he showed. He can take bath in Radhakund. First of all, do this. Light Raghunatha Dasa Goswami. So now we're going to describe a little about his life. This is just some of his outstanding characteristics. He was, as mentioned, he was born in a fabulously wealthy family. And his teacher or his spiritual master was Balaramacharya. Balaramacharya was Yadunandana Acharya's disciple, and they lived in a nearby town, Chandapur. And they were priests of the whole family. The Majumdar family was the family name. And so the image that you see here, you'll see the image again. It means it's Yadunandan Acharya. Yadunandan Acharya was a disciple of Advaita Acharya. And Yadunandan Acharya had received the blessings of Vasudeva Datta. These two, Advaita Acharya and Vasudeva Datta, are really exalted personalities. And Yadunandan Acharya was the disciple of Advaita Acharya. Balaramacharya was his disciple. And the two were close by physically, where they lived, and they were the priest of the Majumdar family. So when Haridas Thakur was traveling about, he was invited by Balaramacharya to stay at his place. Now, Haridas Thakur was a Muslim, but he was absorbed in the chanting of the holy name. And look there by his right elbow, there's a painting of the 6 Goswamis. So when he stayed at the home of Balaramacharya, Haridas Thakur met Raghunatha Das. It's said that this exchange between Haridas Thakur, who stayed there for some time, was the reason for Raghunatha Das being able to achieve the association of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which happened later. So later is the first association that that Raghunatha Das had. And this is when Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas. When he took sannyas, Lord Nityananda tricked him. He is planning to go to Vrindavan, but instead he tricked him and they went to Shantipur. So Mahaprabhu's at Shantipur. So naturally, Ananta Acharya and Balaramacharya had gone too. Because they were there, Raghunatha Das was able to go. And when he was there, Advaita Acharya made sure that Raghunatha Das regularly received Lord Chaitanya's remnants for the duration of time. He was in Shantipur. So he was very young when this happened. And then a little later was their second meeting. This is when Lord Chaitanya, after meeting Rupa and Sanatan, yesterday and the day before we heard about their meeting, Rupa and Sanatan, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was headed back to Puri. On his way back to Puri, little review because of the distraction. Raghunath Das met Haridas Thakur, which was the seed that started his devotional life. He met Lord Chaitanya directly, just as Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas. Later, he met Lord Chaitanya for the second time. And the second time was when Lord Chaitanya was on his way back to Jagannath Puri after meeting Rupa and Sanatan. After meeting Rupa and Sanatan, he went a little further north to, as you see, Kanai Natashala, and then he went again south. And on his way going south, he passed through Shantipur, and he stayed for some time at Shantipur. And at that time, that's when Raghunath was just 19, and he met Lord Chaitanya for the second time. And he arranged, because Lord Chaitanya spent a few days, he arranged an opportunity to meet with him. And Raghunath Das was really anxious, like transcendentally anxious, to be with Lord Chaitanya. And he had tried between that first and the second meeting, after the first meeting, many, many, many times to run away and join Lord Chaitanya. But it didn't work because his father sent guards to go find him and brought him back home. And so now he's meeting with Lord Chaitanya for the second time, begging Lord Chaitanya, please make an arrangement so I can be with you. And Lord Chaitanya spoke the following words: calm yourself and return home. Don't be foolish. It takes time to cross the ocean of material suffering. Don't make a show of monkey renunciation, Markata Vairagya, simply for other people's benefit. Enjoy the worldly life in a moderate way without attachment. Be fixed on Krishna internally, while externally dealing with the world in the appropriate fashion. It will not be long before Krishna delivers you. Now remember, he has no interest from childhood in material things, and that's the atmosphere. His parents were Vaishnavas, but they were a little on the materialistic side, and extremely wealthy and enjoying their wealth and all of those things. And he had no attraction at all. So he just wanted Lord Chaitanya's renounced association, and Lord Chaitanya is giving him this very specific instruction. So then the next event that happens in his growing up is some incident that took place between himself and the Chaduri. A Chaduri is a title, and it's a title that has to do with being a tax collector for the Muslim ruler, the Nawab. So the arrangement was the Nawab was like, in effect, the landholder, and then there's sub-landholders under the king. So there's an intermediary, or a Chaduri, who goes to the landholders and collects taxes from the landholders, who would collect taxes from the people that do agriculture on the land. So the Majumdar family had an arrangement with the king that they cut out the middleman. The Chaduri was the middleman, and he was supposed to get 25% of whatever they collected. But they didn't give the 25% to the Chaduri. They just gave the normal amount to the king or the Shah. So the Chaduri was upset. He reported it to the king. They're only giving, they're cutting me out. They're not giving they're not giving me what I should be getting, although you're getting what you should be getting. So he became their enemy, and the Shah or the king, authorized him to have the two brothers, that's his father and uncle, arrested. They were out of town when the Chuduri came, and the government officers came, so they locked up Raghunath Das. And every day the Chuduri came and tried different ways to get the money, that his 25%. And, and where's your father and where's your uncle? And, they're out of town. And so he he made a very clever arrangement. Raghunath Das showed the reason for telling all this is he displayed, he actually had the prowess to do worldly things. So what he did was, after many, many, many days of being in jail, he said to the Chuduri, you are like my father. And my father and you are then like brothers. And in families, sometimes brothers will quarrel one day, and the next day they're happy and they're jolly. And this is just one of those things that will pass. So please don't take it so seriously. And please show your affection to me like you would show to your son. And he said it in such a way, it's not, I didn't say it in such a way, but he said it in such a way that he said it in such a way that Chuduri started to cry, meaning he was expert. And Chuduri said, from this day forward, I'll treat you like my son. So please just make some arrangements so that your father and uncle can see that I get the proper money. And some arrangements were made, and he got his money, and things were nice. So the point is, Raghunath Das showed that he had material skill, worldly savvy. He just wasn't interested in it. But the instruction Lord Chaitanya had given him, behave in the world, do your duties in the proper way. He was married. He had a very beautiful, attractive wife and money and things, everything that a materialistic person would love to have. But he had no interest in it. Next major event in his growing up is Lord Nityananda was not so far away, visiting, because Lord Nityananda was given an assignment by Lord Chaitanya to travel throughout Bengal and distribute the holy name. So one of the places he went was along the banks of the river Ganga. There's a place called Panihati. It's a very nice place. It's not very far from Calcutta. And he convinced his father that he could go visit Lord Nityananda. When he visited Lord Nityananda, he was seated under a tree with many, many, many hundreds of people around him, followers. And Lord Nityananda saw him coming from a distance. And he's omniscient, so he knew who he was. And he ordered him, you come here. And in a funny way, like a thief, you don't come near me, but simply try to run away. Now that I have caught you, I shall punish you. I want you to feed all my followers chipped rice and yogurt. Now that's not a punishment. That's a reward. You get to feed the Vaishnavas. That's very nice. But Lord Nityananda was saying it in a funny way because that's his nature. So chipped rice with condensed milk and chipped rice with yogurt was the plan. And Raghunath Das was happy to use his wealth in this way. He bought up all the ingredients in the area, and they had them all mixed and offered to the Lord. And the description, it takes many long section of the Bhagavatam. There's so many people, there wasn't room for them on the banks of the Ganga, so some were half submerged in the water of the Ganga, receiving their clay pot of chipped rice and yogurt and condensed milk. And as you see in the painting, it was such an ecstatic event that Lord Chaitanya personally came. Lord Chaitanya personally came. Oh, he was living in Puri. He personally came in his spiritual identity.
Someone is at the front door.
Wow. And they had, after having their meal, the two lords, they had kirtan. And they were dancing and dancing and dancing. And they ran out of ingredients, so we went and got more ingredients and distributing the ingredients to all the Vaishnavas, and it was a big festival. And at the end of that big festival, Raghunath Das petitioned Lord Nityananda in the way that you see here. And here's what he said. Very, very humble expression. I am the lowest of men, the most sinful, fallen, and condemned. Nevertheless, I desire to attain the shelter at the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Like a dwarf who wants to catch the moon, I have tried my best many times, but I have never been successful. No one can attain the shelter of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu without your mercy. Although I am unfit and greatly afraid to submit this plea, please be especially merciful toward me by granting me shelter at the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This was his desire, and he understood rightly so. To get Lord Chaitanya's association, it's by the mercy of Lord Nityananda. So again, Lord Nityananda called him over, placed his foot on his head, as you see in this nice painting. Raghunath emotionally asked Lord Nityananda through Raghava Pandit, because he would always speak through someone. So Raghava Pandit was the landholder in charge of this area. How he could possibly gain freedom from his material entanglements and obtain the association of Mahaprabhu. Nityananda placed his feet on Raghunath's head, as you see in the painting. And here's what Lord Nityananda said to him. You arranged this feast on the banks of the river, and Mahaprabhu was merciful to you and came here himself to enjoy it. He blessed you by accepting the offering of chipped rice and yogurt. Then, after watching the devotees dancing, he took prasad in the evening. Lord Gauranga came here just to deliver you, and now he has removed any impediments which remained. He will turn you over to Sarup Damodar and make you his confidential servant. He will keep you by his side. Go home now and forget your worries. You will soon be able to go to the Lord without any difficulties. Now let's recall the number of years that Raghunath remained in Puri. 16 years, right? 16 years. And Lord Chaitanya stayed in Jagannath Puri for a total of 24 years, but Lord Chaitanya was in Puri for only a short while, like a half a year, and then traveled in South India for 2 years, and then a little while in Puri, and then traveled to Vrindavan, and then back to Puri. So, for not the full duration of time that Lord Chaitanya was after he had returned to Puri, but almost, like maybe 2 years short, because like 18 years in Puri after his 6 years of travel. That's what is commonly is described. So Raghunath was with Lord Chaitanya for almost the entire time that Lord Chaitanya was in Puri, almost. So now here comes this topic that Varsana wanted to hear something more about. The trick, using tricks to get a transcendental objective. Normally we don't do that. But Raghunath Das tricked Yadunandanacharya. And the trick was that it was in the evening. Raghunath Das was understood to be, very capable at worldly things, although detached from them. And Yadunandanacharya had responsibility for the worship of the deity, and he was having difficulty finding a pujari to do the worship of the deity. So he, before the morning hour arose, before the sun came up, he was together with Raghunath Das, and they were going to the home of the pujari to make sure he would do the deity worship in the morning. Raghunath Das said, "No problem, I'll take care of this. You can take rest." So Yadunandanacharya, recognizing that Raghunath Das is very skilled, he went to take rest. And Raghunath thought that now's my chance. Because normally there were guards, and now there's no guards. It's early in the morning hours before the sun came up, and this and that. And so what did he do? He ran. He ran. And within 12 days, he traveled all the way from his home to Jagannath Puri, fasting except for almost nothing, and finally made it to Lord Chaitanya's association in Jagannath Puri. So now I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about this trickery topic because we came across it already with Sanatana Goswami, who also did something tricky in order to escape from being, put in a prison under the custody of a prison guard. He did something tricky to get free. So this is a little discussion on when is it okay, is it ever okay to do trickery, in case you have to encounter. The general rule is, no, you don't do trickery. You be straightforward in all of your activities. We know in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada writes about Vaishyas. Vaishyas will, it's almost a prerequisite. Not, it's very common for persons who are Vaishyas to stretch the truth about things. Prabhupada made a comment. One of the things that a Vaishya will do is say, you rub this on your head and it'll make your hair grow. Or, sir, for you I make no profit. That's another one. And Vaishyas live by making profit. But if they say, for you I'm making no profit, it's stretching the truth. It's not honest. But right in Bhagavad Gita, Vaishyas may do like that. And above the Vaishya is the Brahmana, and the Brahmana doesn't speak anything other than the truth. That's one of the outstanding hallmark essential qualities of a Brahmana, is their truthfulness. And the mature stage of the Brahmana is a Vaishnava. And generally speaking, Vaishnavas will speak the truth. But wait a minute, we see Raghunath is saying something different. Sanatana Goswami is saying something different. And then we come to the platform of Shuddha Bhaktas. Well, that's Raghunath, and that's Sanatana Goswami. So for the way that is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita is, when there is in fact a higher purpose, the pleasure of Krishna, to be served, then in special circumstances, when one is in the Shuddha Bhakta platform, one may do something a little different. And then you'll find there's some trickery. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time speaking about eternal associates of Krishna in Braja, and it's kind of one of the things they do regularly. We'll give some examples. Here's a classic example from Sri Vaishnavism. in one of the Alvars, the founders of the writings and teachings of the Sri Sampradaya. One of them is Tirumangai Alvar, celebrated story. He, along with some disciples, came across this now, at that time then, deteriorated Sri Ranganath temple. So they took it upon themselves to go door to door and ask wealthy people to contribute something to restore the temple. They declined. And so he took another tricky tact. Tirumangai and his 4 disciples became a gang of robbers. His first disciple would entangle the materialists in the net of arguments. Tarka, Chudamani was his name. And while they were engaged in argument, the second disciple, Dwara Unmochaka, he'd open the door of the treasury house. And the third disciple, Chayagraha, made everyone motionless. And then his fourth disciple, Jalo Parichara, entered the palaces that were surrounded by deep moats and plundered all their wealth. So they did a robbery program. And, they wasn't for themselves. It was for restoring the temple. And after the temple was restored, there's a whole story of what was done in order to, make everything stop. But Chaya Graha, one of his disciples' names, whoever was touched by his shadow became immobile. And Jalo Parichara, he could walk on water. And the end result was they built the Raghunatha temple. Of course, the Raghunath deity is there, but they built what you see today, and pretty fantastic, what you see there today. And the architecture is just amazing. But, it took some wealth to do it, and that's what they used the wealth for, not for any of their personal purposes. An extreme example, but it's an example. Here's a nice example from description given by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on the history of the Suryadev deity. Now, when we were doing our virtual Vrindavan Yatra, we discussed this topic. So some of you are familiar with it, but those of you that are not, it's a nice narration. There is a description that one time Krishna was so absorbed in his activities with Radharani and the other gopis that he didn't even notice that his flute, which is normally tucked in his waistband, fell out. So Lalita found the flute, scolded the flute, saying, "You're hard, and you just have holes, and you grow from the mud by the side of a river, and who are you anyways, and you cause so much trouble. I'm going to teach you a lesson." And she put the flute in her braid. And then the story goes on. Krishna didn't notice. The next day, Krishna and Radha were together, and they were playing a game, a gambling game.